Hello everybody and welcome back to another video in our series on the Arctic Studies program, specifically on the lecture for on the 8th of September, the Arctic Our Home. One thing that I want to talk about before the lecture, and remember this, we're going to do this as an inverted classroom, so you're supposed to read up on the material, watch the videos, get some information on your own if you want. And then we use the time on the 8th of September from 2:15 to 4:45 p.m. Finnish time to discuss this issue a bit further. And one of the issues I want to talk about is cooperation in the Arctic. Cooperation in the Arctic often aims at finding common solutions for shared problems. A lot of the scenarios and of the circumstances in the Arctic are similar. We have similar climatic challenges, similar challenges with regard to limited infrastructure, low population density, human safety, things like that. Cooperation across borders is not new, and as I mentioned in one of the other videos earlier, this cooperation is also cooperation which transcends international borders. International law is an important tool for this form of cooperation. One way to do this is, for example, the Svalbard Treaty. The Svalbard Treaty of 1920, 100 years old already this year, regulates the use of the Svalbard archipelago, the islands formerly known as Spitsbergen, which are part of Norway. Norway has sovereignty over this land, but citizens of the other countries which have ratified this international treaty, they have access to this land and they can use this land. So that's why we have a lot of mining operations there. There's a lot of foreign and international activity based on international treaty, but without Norway giving out sovereignty. In a more modern context, we have the Arctic Council. We have cross-border cooperation between countries which, in political terms, often find it very difficult to cooperate otherwise. But of course, we also have the cooperation in the Nordic countries, which have a long history of working together. In Europe, we have the open borders with the Schengen Agreement, but in the Nordic countries, the borders have been open for much longer. Nevertheless, cooperation also raises questions. It raises the question, who is actually an actor in the Arctic? When you look at the Arctic Council, for example, you'll see that there's Denmark as one of the member states. Now, Denmark itself is not an Arctic nation, but of course it is Arctic through Greenland. Now, Greenland eventually might become independent. There's a significant political movement within Greenland working in that direction. And of course, Greenland has been in the news quite a lot recently due to the specific interests of the current American administration. We don't really know how the future for places like Greenland will look like, but we know that there will be a lot of changes, a lot of challenges. We can already predict that governance in the Arctic is going to remain based on international law and based on the spirit of cooperation. Now, governance, first of all, requires that we understand what we are governing here. The central part of the Arctic Ocean, for example, is beyond the national jurisdiction of the coastal states, while the land territory is, of course, under full sovereignty. So here we have a very different situation when we compare to that in Antarctica, for example. The maritime zones of the coasts of the coastal nations of the Arctic Ocean, they are fully regulated already by international law, either by the International Law of the Sea, the UN Conventional Law of the Sea specifically, or by international law of the sea in the form of customary international law. We have a number of different frameworks and fora which make it possible to engage in cooperation in the Arctic. This involves states, it involves representatives of indigenous peoples, for example, through the Arctic Council, but also as observers, non-Arctic countries. Non-Arctic countries have dramatically increased their interest in the Arctic in recent years, and a number of nations have expressed a specific interest. For example, the People's Republic of China is referring to itself as a so-called near-Arctic state. But what is governance? If you look at the textbook by Durfee and Johnston, which I recommend for the course as part of the reading material, you'll see that they define it on page 5 as not just about governance, and that's a direct quote, governance is not just about governments making regulations and laws, it is a process that involves negotiation, shared decision making, and policy development in multiple geographic and political levels, end of quote. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about Arctic governance. This is not just decisions made in faraway capital cities, as I mentioned in an earlier video, but it's also involving the people who actually live in the Arctic, the people who are affected by these decisions. International law can be an important tool towards increasing the participation of local communities. Governance happens on different levels: global, local, regional, national, between different countries, and so on. We're going to discuss which institutions are most relevant for us here in the Arctic and how we can use cooperation as a form to enhance governance.